Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Author Spotlight, where we get to learn the highs, the lows, and the lessons learned from the successful published authors. And today's no different. But before I do that, I just need to remind you that this is sponsored by Librotas, which is Karen Williams, the book mentor. And I have got the wonderful Rachel Bennett with me today in the studio. So welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about you and your book. Let's start with you first and then a little bit about you and your book.
Okay, so I am a HR professional and have been for 20 plus years. Well, we'll scoot across that one. So most of my career has been in HR, one form or another. Over the years, I've literally done all sorts of different HR, from strategies to learning and development, reward management, etc. And I put myself through quite a lot of qualifications. But then a couple of years ago, I was a director of HR for 6.5 years. Absolutely loved it. But when COVID hit and all of the other things that were happening, I don't know, I think I was just getting burnt out and I wanted a change, but I didn't want to go up to the next level. And I wasn't actually sure I wanted to stay at the level I was at. So made a decision to set up my own consultancy. So I went into HR Fusion, which is now about 17 months old, something like that. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really sure what I wanted, how I wanted to work this. I knew that I wanted to stay in HR, and I was getting a lot of advice from a lot of people to say it's really good to get a niche, and what is your niche. So I spent an awful lot of time working out what my niche was, and every time it came back to the same thing. It was about culture. It was about how we feel when we go to work, what makes an organization a great place to work. And culture became the umbrella for everything that I'd learned in HR through qualifications and through experience. So the next logical step in my head was to deep dive into culture. One of the things I've always wanted to do was write a book, but I've never had the confidence to write a book. Never thought it was possible, didn't know where to start. Through wanting to kind of niche and wanting to make sure that I really knew my topic, decided writing a book was the way forward. Because it would then enable me to be able to deep dive into company culture in a safe space. Because if I kind of got through it and then thought, well, actually, I don't know what I'm doing, then nobody needs to know. As it happens, thankfully, I do know what I'm doing, and I wrote a book. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
And that's a great way to hear it, because I think it's important for people to know that writing a book is a way of cementing what you already know. But it often also helps you to expand that, because I think as you start to formulate it and write it for other people to read, we do just discover, don't we, little holes in our what's the word, experience, knowledge, whatever it is. And then of course you do the research.
Absolutely.
So not only do you give this great wisdom to other people, but you as the author and the business owner, you develop your own understanding of what you know through that process. So tell us about the book.
Yeah. So the book itself then is called Shadow Cultures. It's like I say, it started with this kind of, I wanted to write more about culture and make sure that I knew what I was talking about. And so the book originally started in a slightly different form. So originally I'd picked out 6 popular cultures, and I started writing about these popular cultures. But then the second half of the book was going to be a model for how to change and improve the cultures. But like I said a minute ago, one of the things that I was struggling with at the beginning was I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know where to start, and I'd read lots of books on how to write a book, but I wasn't confident enough. So I employed, I suppose, for want of a better way, Karen as my book mentor, and I joined her program last Christmas, which was a 6-week online course, and that gave me then the structure to be able to do the book. I then went on the book retreat, which your good self was on, which was great. And it was then that I kind of started looking at the book and saying that it doesn't fit. Something's wrong with the book. And I think because I'd left work and there was still a lot of emotions around, you know, when I left and why I left and all the other things, something was missing. And I think looking back now, I think I just wasn't being completely honest with myself in the book, and I needed me in the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you and I actually we had several sessions where I was collaring your time and going, oh, I don't know. And through some different exercises that you did with me, I kind of came out with this, and I became a shadow of my former self. And that stuck. And we kind of both went, oh, that's the aha moment. That is the title of the book. And as soon as I got that, I realized the importance of telling my story, which Karen really helped with. And that week was where I started writing that, because it was quite emotional for me to kind of unpack everything. Once I'd done that, though, the first half of the book didn't fit, because picking 6 random cultures just didn't fit. So that's where the shadow culture came from. So the first half of the book is very much about what is company culture? Where does company culture come from? How do we've all got our own maps of the world. So we've all got our own individual cultures. And then if you bring us all together in a team, then what culture is that? And how does the leadership play a part in it? And so that first half of the book became very much my mission to explore the shadow culture. And, you know, we had quite a lot of conversations about the difference between a shadow culture and a toxic culture. And for me, the shadow culture is before the toxic culture. It's this disconnect between what people are saying and what people are doing, and it can get darker and darker, and then it can turn toxic. And in my book, I put some case studies in there as well to give some examples of, you know, where this has gone out of control. So the first half of the book is very much about the shadow culture, and then the second half of the book is a tried and tested model that a teacher taught me about 15 years ago, a version of this. Over the last 15 years, I am an avid note taker, and I've got notes of all different models I've used, what worked, what didn't work. And so I sat in the back garden with loads of pieces of paper and basically recreated this 6-step model. And so the second half of the book is then about, okay, so this is the culture you've got in the first half. The second half is, how do we change it, even if it's tweaks? And so the strap line to my book is transforming cultures one step at a time. So I'm not offering a solution that you can read the book and tomorrow change the culture. It's about the tweaks that we need to do to be able to get a better work-life culture.
And it sounds like where it's evolved, because obviously I spoke to you last April and you've published it then. And so as much as I should know more, is I've heard little bits of it, and it's evolved since then.
Yeah.
It sounds like the shadow culture is really giving people a great way of noticing the symptoms, if you like, of what could lead then to this toxic culture, so that you can get the warning signs much sooner and can do something about it.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So
I think, sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say, I think the way I've tried to put it in my mind is sometimes if we name something, we can feel it a little bit more, or we can see it. So if you say to somebody, or, you know, this is the values that are on the wall, and, you know, the values of the company are trust and empowerment, for example, but then what you're seeing from the person that's talking to you is no trust, and they're taking all the empowerment away from you. Sometimes you kind of sit there and think, oh, something's not right. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel right. And so what I'm offering is a word, which is the shadow. And once you kind of go, okay, there's a shadow, but in that relationship, the minute you've got that and you can visualize it, you can do something about it, because it becomes forefront of your brain.
It gives you something to talk about. And I think the other thing we talked about, wasn't it, is if someone says, oh, you've got a toxic culture, I think it takes huge courage to go and actually admit that you've got toxic culture. Even just having a label that you're toxic was actually, there's going to be little bits that might be toxic, and there's little tiny bits, but it doesn't mean the whole thing is completely. And I think when I just sort of see these people in their hazmat suits and like, you can't go in there, it's totally destroyed. And actually having this sense and the language of what is happening before you get to that point,
absolutely, it's a lot softer,
easier. Yeah, it's easier to shine the light and recognize that we're going to have the light and the dark. That's part of being human, isn't it? That's how it all is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fabulous. So I think you've kind of covered it, but becoming an author for you has been like what?
Surreal and really scary. I love what I do. I am quite highly qualified. I am very experienced. I know what I'm doing. However, to put that on a book and get it published and know that it's gone around the world, all my life is the scariest feeling in the world. And I would have been quite happy just to write my book and then go, oh yeah, I've done my book now, and then just move on to something else and not actually publish it or anything else. To push myself in the beginning of the book, it talks a little bit about my journey, and my journey came from coming out of education, not really being able to read and write very well at all, and not really thinking I ever needed to. So to go from that, I became addicted to education. So for me, a book was almost my final tick in the box. I've got quite a lot of qualifications, experience, etc. And so for me, that ultimate education of not being able to read and write properly at 16, 17 to being my age now and having a published book is like, it's quite a breathtaking for me personally.
Yeah.
It's a personal journey. So it was very surreal. And I don't know if you've seen it, but on my LinkedIn profile, there's a little tiny video of me opening the book. And when it came through the post, it's really, really bizarre because you live and breathe this book. And I lived and breathed it for, as in writing, for 12 months. Before that, it was a bit longer than that. And all of a sudden, you have to stop writing and wait. And in my head, I was like, oh, okay, I've in a qualification, I rarely turned up to the cap and gown thing because I was like, oh, I'm not really bothered in that. So for me, it was kind of going through the same experience. But then when the book arrived and I opened it, you'll see in the video, I get a little bit emotional, but when the video is turned off, I'm in floods of tears because it's the most surreal thing to physically see your name on a book.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was bizarre. And even now, it published the end of November. And I'm just getting used to people going, oh, I was on a call yesterday and somebody said, oh, we've just bought your book. And you have to stop and go, my book? Oh yeah, my book.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
and that's such an inspiration because so many people, I think, come, and a lot of the work I do, which is probably where the conversations you and I were having on the retreat, is that we come away from school with lots of beliefs. And neurodiversity, we're more familiar with it, and HR obviously get involved with that now. But even though you know it,
yes,
it still doesn't take away the stigma that's a lot of our generation were raised with, that there was something wrong with you if you couldn't do these things. There wasn't an understanding of the strengths that those individual divergent minds bring to a culture. It was more a focus of what you couldn't do rather than what you could do as a result of that. So I don't think you're alone, and I think lots of people don't get around to writing books because of fear, belief, or their own neurodivergence. So that's why Karen and I love working particularly on the retreats, and particularly through the smart author system and the sort of the accountability, is because depending on how your brain works, we all need different support to get that information out of our brain onto a piece of paper.
Absolutely.
So it's really inspiring.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, the course I did of Karen's was brilliant, and she keeps it open for a long time, so I could pop back in, and so for my learning style, it worked because I was able to go through whichever section, learn from it, but then I was able to go back to it as many times as I wanted, and therefore there was no embarrassment of, I don't really understand that, let's go back. So
the need to repeat it.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me, the book retreat was probably the bit that I needed the most, because I was an emotional wreck, as you know, when I was on the book retreat. But that's what I needed. I just needed to stop. I needed to be in a different location, and I needed just to have that space to think and decide what I needed to do, and just kind of peel back the layers a little bit. And so the journey for me, it wasn't just about a book, which sounds it was almost about picking myself back up together. I think there was a lot of anger in there as well, anger with myself and how I had handled different things, and so there was a lot of stuff going on in the writing of the book, and the book is almost a year's therapy that you do with yourself. And then because part of the book is talking to other people and testing your ideas out, and as that year's therapy went on, my confidence came back and I came back in the room. And my business is, like I say, 16, 17 months old, and touch wood, I have been so privileged. I am fully booked and I'm really busy, which is brilliant, and I love it. And I don't know if I'd have got that if I hadn't have taken a step back and immersed myself into the world that I love, which is culture, and creating.
Yeah.
And the book was an outcome of that deep dive into
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think there are lots of people out there, if they're watching the video, is that they can get into that situation where they, like you said, you've always wanted to write a book.
Yes.
It could be the fear, the trauma, the upset from, told you can't write, you're not very good, you can't read, or whatever that's going on.
Yeah.
Or the subject matter that you're writing about. Often the reason we're writing about it is because something didn't work for us, and we want to give people the insights. And so there's also hurt from that. And that is a lot of the work that I do with Karen and alongside the clients, because obviously, generally as human beings, if we talk from a place of what I call drama, so the victim or the persecutor or whatever, it's not always easy for people to receive it and not to learn from it. So it's a great thing to know that consciously, and that's one thing I really admired about you, is that you were really aware from the very beginning that you didn't know, but the book was going to help you know. Yes. I don't know that you knew that it was going to help you heal so quickly and to help you work through that process. But you consciously chose to use the book as a vehicle to do the research, to get to know your niche in more detail. And the byproduct is you got to know yourself, which was lovely to watch and witness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, I'd encourage anybody, not just necessarily writing books, but I would encourage anybody that's struggling to take a step back and just take some time out and get help. But the help doesn't necessarily mean professional help. It might be a friend but for me, I knew that I couldn't continue on the journey that I was on, but I didn't know what my new journey would be. And, I've got an amazing husband and my mom. And so I've got a great support network that kind of said, just jump and we'll catch you type thing. But I am a very determined and very, very independent lady. So whilst I needed that network and I needed to know they were there, I bounced off them quite quick. And, for me, the book is the pinnacle of all of this. And people would say to me, oh, I bet you're going to want to sell hundreds of them. And I'm like, no, it's a business card for me. From that point of view, for me, the book was part of my journey, my healing, and my creation of my business. So even if I didn't sell any copies and just give copies away, then it's done its job. It's not. So I think there is something in there about, if you want to write a book, decide what your book is for. If you want to be a best-selling author and making millions of pounds, I'm not sure my type of book is the way to go. But if you want to learn your business and you really want to kind of deep dive into it, I'm sure there's a famous saying somewhere about the best way to learn is to teach somebody else.
Absolutely. And definitely you learn about yourself as a matter of it. And I think it's important to say that quite often the model that Karen's teaching is, we're not looking to make millions from the actual book sales, but the book sales will support your marketing, will support your sales process. And I know for me, I've just ordered a whole load of books of mine. So the new intake of 10 people coming on a course, they all get a copy of the book. Well, it's so much easier for me now to just go and read chapter 5 in between sessions, or read chapter 7, because it's a tool that I can use. And so I'm usually buying them and giving them as part of my programs rather than I'm selling them per se. But they, like you say, it helps you clarify your own thinking, and it gives you something tangible to see and to share with other people.
Absolutely. I've really found, and like I say, mine's really early stages, but as you will know, and anybody watching this that knows me, I sometimes can be a little bit of a magpie. I can go, oh, that's shiny, and go off over there. But actually having my book really helps me stay in my lane. It reminds me of what my niche is, and it's a really concrete, because I kind of look and I think, okay, is that to do with my book, and what's in the content of my book? And the answer is probably no. And so, as an example, off the back of the book, I'm now designing a whole series of blogs on management styles, because for me, a management style is a direct correlation to the organizational culture. So that comes, so it's helping me stay in my lane, to say, this is my niche. Yes, I can do all of these other things outside of my niche, but they're not in my niche, so pull it back. So there's a lot of really great, and the other thing I have noticed is it's really increased my visibility, and I'm not very good. I'm getting better, but I'm not so good at saying to people, oh, I'm an author, because it kind of sounds like, it just doesn't sound right. But I've sat in meetings where people have said, oh yes, and Rachel, tell them about your book, or and people are generally like, oh wow, you're an author. And so there's a credibility that naturally seems to come with, you've written a book, therefore you must know your topic.
I think it's not until you've written one, I don't think really, that you fully appreciate just how much is involved in writing one. And I think that's where the credibility comes, because it takes time, effort, energy, and courage to put it out there and have it evaluated by everybody, and for you to stand your ground and to stand by what you think and what you believe and what you've experienced. So I never quite got it before about how a book builds credibility until I went through the process, and I can absolutely relate to staying in the lane, and that's definitely something that's helped me. So I think we've pretty much covered most of the questions we were going to do, but the one I want to think is, what's the most important thing that you've learned as a process of going through this journey of writing this book?
Oh gosh, the most important, there's loads and loads of things that I've learned. I think the most important thing, and it's a saying I say quite a lot, and I don't actually know who said it in the first place, but I have learned the importance of not trying to eat the elephant whole. And what I mean by that is, it's great. Look at what success looks like. For me, success looks like I'm a published author, and it's to do with culture. That's all I ever needed to know. And then don't try and do all of it at the same time, because it's just too overwhelming. For me, get somebody like Karen. Follow the course, have the accountability, follow the process. And I think it was Karen or yourself, can't remember, one of you said trust in the process. And so for me, that was the key, is don't try and eat the elephant whole. Understand what the elephant looks like, and then trust in the process, and just keep breathing and getting your way through it, because before you know where you are, you're a year in it, and somebody's going, oh yeah, let's look at editing that now, and you're going, oh my life, I can't edit.
Absolutely.
I think I wouldn't do it.
So I think there's two bits there, because obviously Karen has a process which she has mapped out, and then you, as authors, you could just go, right, I just need to do this bit, then you need to do that bit, and then it is just trusting, because some people who like to know the big picture need to want sort of almost wanting to understand how it all fits together. But actually it's like, if you can just do like one bite at a time kind of thing you're talking about. And I think when I've said to you about trusting the process, it's almost trusting your process as well, that you as an author, the way that you write, the order that you write, how you collect information, how you make sense of your experiences. We all have our own way of accessing that information. So some people have to reflect on it. Some people have to go and talk to people. Some people have to do interviews again. Some people have to, we're all different. And I think that's where it's trusting your own process, rather than getting frustrated if you don't feel like you can fit into the way somebody else is telling you to do it.
100%. And I think that's why I put it off so many times, because I thought, oh, I can't do this, I can't do it. But actually once I kind of took the leap of faith and said, right, okay, I can't do it on my own, but I know people that can help me, and I know that they know processes, and I went wrong a few times. I went on a tangent and then kind of pulled myself back. But it's all a learning journey. And for me, I am the bigger picture person. I absolutely want to know what success looks like, how I'm going to get there. And so for me, that was my biggest kind of learning of, sometimes you just mingle with the professionals that have done this before, and trust, and deep breaths. And, you know,
just take the next step. I was working with a client just this morning who said, actually, for a change last year, so instead of worrying about the big outcome, I just took the next step every day, and we've actually had massive results as a result of it.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. What do you wish you'd known before you started?
That is a killer question. I don't know if there is anything I wish I'd have known. I think there's lots of, I'm not very good at having regrets, so this is why I struggle with it, with the question, because, you know, my first thing is I wish I'd have known that I could do it because I did it years ago, but I probably wasn't in the space to do it years ago. So I think I don't, because I surrounded myself with the people that I knew that I could trust and that had already done this sort of thing before. There isn't anything that I wish I'd have particularly known. But now going forward, I didn't realize that I would miss not writing, which is really bizarre because I spent
it takes up a lot of headspace, so doesn't it? It takes up a lot of headspace.
Absolutely. So maybe that is the one of, you know, I wish I'd have realized just how intense it was. I was setting up a business, I needed to earn money, and I was writing a book all at the same time. And so, you know, for me, it took 14-15 months of 7 days a week hammering everything. And so maybe if I'd have known that before, but then I probably wouldn't have done it.
And it is back to trust your own process. You were very, very clear when I very first met you, is like you really knew what would work best for you. And you knew it was short term. It was always like short term pain for long term gain, and you were committed to that.
I think I've had years of, you know, I've put a lot of time into working out who I am and what my strengths and weaknesses are. And I'm a HR professional. I love what I do, and I learn about me through it. So I think when I started the process, I was very clear on what I wanted, and talking to you and particularly and to Karen, I'd already mapped out where I was going. So
well, with my listening detective hat on, what I will say to you, though, is sometimes when we have it that intense and it's that full on, we may need to have a little conversation with ourselves if we want to write a second book, because I think our own system will go, I can't do it like that again. That was just too much. And it's like either reminding yourself that you really loved it and the outcome was great, so you can get started again, or it's doing it differently next time. It's finding a different way to work, isn't
it? Absolutely. Well, you'll be pleased or not, I don't know, but I've already got a list of about 4 quite big projects to do on the back of this book before I can jump into another book. So I definitely need to have a little rest from that for the time being. But you know, when we were at the book retreat, I was like, no, one book and that's me. And now I'm like, there might be more there.
You can't help yourself. Once you've unlocked that book writing thing, it starts happening. What was your lowest point on this journey?
My lowest point on the journey was starting. And I know I probably said that already, but because I'd come out of the work environment, and I wanted to do a change, and I felt like I was taking 100 steps backwards in my career, and I was low. I was completely burnt out, and worn out, and my self-esteem and everything else was really low. And so for me, that was my lowest point, and that's why I needed the book retreat, because I was at my lowest point going into that book retreat, and I knew that I needed empty space, and I needed just somebody to look after me and feed me and give me, when we had amazing vegan food and everything. It was really lovely, but I needed the sunshine, and I needed not to have people asking me questions. And so my lowest point was when I started the book, but I knew how to adapt to my lowest point and come out of that. There were moments throughout the whole book where I'd set myself targets to write a certain amount of time, and something would happen and I couldn't get to it, and different things. So there were little bits along the way, but I genuinely am a very positive person, and I love setting myself targets and goals and stuff. So generally, on the whole, there wasn't many low points throughout the book. It was the beginning, and believing in myself that I could do it when I wasn't sure I could. So yeah,
and that's going back to that knowing the process, isn't it, and what works. So
yeah,
I think you've already said it, having a published book
I know,
in your hand with your name on it. But is there any other sort of, what's the biggest success to date with the book other than that?
I think the biggest success for me is that, this sounds really bad now, doesn't it? This shows you where my personality sits sometimes, but I haven't had anybody say it's rubbish. I've had loads of really good feedback, and loads of people have, you know, I've had somebody literally this morning text me and said, oh, I've just started reading your book and I can't put it down. And there's quite a few people that have texted me and come back to me and kind of complimenting me on my little bit of the story at the beginning, which was my vulnerable side of the book.
Yeah.
So I think, that, and I'm really, really proud of that, because, you know, even if it just helps one person have a better work-life culture, then it was worth it. So
absolutely. And I think, you know, there are so many people in the workplace, even with all that we know about, you know, neurodiversity and equality and all the other stuff, people are struggling, and sometimes they haven't got a diagnosis or a label, but they just know they don't fit in or don't belong, or they can't do it the way that they're being expected to do it, but they really want to. They want to be part of it. They want to be part of the team. And good HR and good management means that those people get heard and they get the resource and support that they need.
Absolutely. And the book itself is predominantly written for leaders, managers, HR professionals, but there's nothing stopping anybody picking it up and kind of going, oh, okay, I recognize the signs of that, and then being able to talk to somebody about it. For me, as a HR professional, I've had many conversations over the years where maybe somebody's exiting an organization, and to a certain point, you can have a conversation with them about, you know, is this the type of job you really want to do? And, you know, some people's personalities suit different types of jobs and different organizations. And honestly, I could go on about it forever.
Yeah.
Why there's probably more books in there somewhere. But my hope is that this will help us all have a little bit of a happier work environment, because we're there a long time. So,
yeah, just one little step. So on that note, you can see the ticker tape going below. It's at hrfusion.co.uk/our-book. So please do check out Rachel's website, find out more about how she can help you in your business. But also, if you're an author and you want to be inspired by somebody who said they couldn't read and write and have now written a book, please do check out Rachel's book. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rachel. And I was going to ask you a little while ago, could you give us a copy of it? And I forgot to. So well done. I'm glad you remembered that. So on that note, I'm going to say love you and leave you. Thank you very much, Rachel. And I'll see you on the other side of the show.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So without any further ado, please, if you have been inspired by this, if anything that Rachel said today has thought, gosh, that's me, I really want to write my book and I'm feeling stuck and I don't know where to get started, then please do check in with myself or Karen from Librotas, and we'd be more than happy to help you with your next best step. Until the next show, see you soon. Bye.